Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Yepko, and I'll be tonight's moderator for the presentation on behalf of our sponsors, Davidson River Outfitters, Wild Bearings, and the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. We want to welcome you tonight's presentation and coverage of the Davidson River watershed, a top 100 trout stream in America, is featured in the book by Sam Johnson, Fly Fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway. So tonight's presentation is brought to us by our sponsors. I want to take a quick minute just to thank them and tell you a little bit more about Davidson River Outfitters and the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. Davidson River Outfitters is one of Western North Carolina's premier fly shops and fishing guide services. They're located right on the banks of the Davidson River in Pisgah Forest outside of Brevard, North Carolina, and easily within a short drive of some of the best lake and river fishing the Southeast has to offer. They're open daily throughout the year and offer a wide range of fly fishing gear, fly tying materials, clothing, and lots more. And without a doubt, their guide service is second to none. They know the Davidson River better than anyone around. So whether you're looking for an introductory fly fishing for trout class, a full day float trip hunting big muskies, or just some general advice on the Davidson, they can certainly help you out. So we'd encourage you to reach out to either Kevin or Vanessa or visit them at their website at davidsonflyfishing.com. Also want to send a huge thank you to the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. They are a great steward and advocate for the Blue Ridge Parkway as the primary philanthropic and fundraising partner for the Blue Ridge Parkway. They provide support for a variety of initiatives along the 469-mile route, including historical, cultural preservation, environmental protection, visitor amenities, education, and outreach. The Foundation's CEO, Carolyn Ward, and her staff do an amazing job of collaborating with the Parkway superintendent and staff, raising funds through individual gifts, grants, endowments, and charitable trusts, partnering with other not-for-profit businesses, Chamber of Commerce, tourism bureaus and authorities, and finally, awarding grants that serve the best interest of the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. So for more information on them, we'd encourage you to visit the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation at brpfoundation.org. So let me tell you a little bit about this guy, Sam Johnson, for those of you who may not know of him well. He's to call him a Renaissance man would seem like a little bit of an understatement. As far as his fishing pedigree specifically, he grew up fishing at a young age, was introduced to fly fishing at a very young age, but on the dossier of kind of fishing resume, he's been a charter member, past president, current board member of the Gold Rush chapter of Trout Unlimited up in North Georgia, fished the waters of North Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, Western U.S. waters, specifically the Rockies, Cascades, Sierras, author of the first-in-class book, Fly Fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway, the North Carolina section, and he'll tell you all about that and why it is truly a first-in-class book. He's been a freelance writer for the American Fly Fishing magazine, has a great article that was published actually in the September 2020 issue on Courthouse Creek in Western North Carolina, is a member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America, the Georgia Outdoor Writers Association, has been building custom bamboo fly rods for over 25 years for the likes of LL Bean out of Maine, Wright and McGill in Denver, and dozens of anglers and collectors worldwide. And in his free time, whenever he has that, for as busy he's been, he's also an equity partner with the Atlanta practice of Newport LLC. They're a national business and advisory practice of a bunch of ex-C-level executives who help companies and private equity firms kind of improve enterprise value. He sits on a number of corporate and advisory boards, is co-owner of Wild Bearings, which focuses on a wide variety of outdoor and sporting goods related materials, is a member of the prestigious Southern Highland Craft Guild out of Atlanta, graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi and played on a 4-year football scholarship underneath Coach Mac Brown, is a past director of the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, been a bagpiper for over 20 plus years, and as far as I can tell, has just about done it all. So with that, Sam, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Jason, that intro makes me sound a whole lot better than I really am. I'm just a fisherman like everyone else. But I really, I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm here solo. My business partner, Chris Sloan, the trout assassin, is out on assignment tonight. So I've got solo duties tonight here. I've been looking forward to talking about the Davidson River for some time. It's definitely one of my favorite watersheds in the eastern United States for a lot of reasons. And I think by the time I'm finished with this presentation, you'll probably see why. It is featured in the book, Fly Fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway. And speaking of the book, I want to hit it real quick because we've got some people on from the West Coast. We got some people on from Canada and even Ireland tonight. And I want to make sure we're putting this in the proper context of what we're looking at. The book, according to Amazon, is a first-in-class book in that there's not another book about fly fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was forwarded by my friend Mark Woods, who's the retired superintendent of the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I just really appreciate his help and his willingness to do that and support in this whole project. About 308 pages. Color, 145 images. Most of those I took, or they're historic images that I got from the University of North Carolina Archives and the National Park Service. There's a huge amount of information in there about the Parkway and its history. I talk about the trout. Of course, most of you who are tuning in tonight know about brook brown and rainbow trout. So, you know, there's probably, but even then, there's probably some things in there you might learn about those trout that you didn't know. I talk about the Parkway hydrology and where it, you know, how it gets its water and what it does when it does get it, how it forms these rivers, creeks, and seeps that we're going to be talking about. And what I've done, and I'm going to show you in just a moment, I've divided it into 4 63-mile sections in North Carolina. In total, over 200 rivers, streams, and creeks that those 4 sections touch. A lot of descriptions about the water. In fact, some of this stuff, I get in trouble by some people because they say I'm hot spotting, and I'm really not hot spotting any more than any outfitter or anyone else that takes people out on the water. I'm just trying to describe it to the best of my ability, what you would expect if you get on that water. As well as how to get to it. A lot of history, which some of that you're going to hear tonight about the Davidson River. And of course, a lot of the stories and lore, as well as where do you stay, what do you eat, and where can you get a beer when it's over with, if that's what you're interested in. But something that's very near and dear to my heart and Chris's heart is that 10% of the book profits go to the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. And we not only talk the talk, we walk the walk. So that's about the book. I'll tell you how you can get it later on if you're interested. A real quick overview of the Blue Ridge Parkway for those of you who are not in this part of the country. And the reason that I think it's important to talk about the Parkway for just a moment is that all of the water coming down the Davidson River, with the exception of one watershed, which is Avery Creek, comes off the Blue Ridge Parkway, as well as most of the rivers and streams that I write about in the book. Is 469 miles long, 252 in North Carolina, 217 in Virginia. And it originally was designed in the early part of the last century, started about 1933, was an idea to connect Shenandoah National Park with the Great Smoky Mountain National Park that had just been completed. So after several years of wrangling back and forth about exactly where it would go, it started in 1935, right in the middle of the Great Depression. And 52 years later, it was finally finished when the viaduct behind Grandfather Mountain was completed. It's the world's longest and narrowest national park. And it's 88,000 acres. And there are places that it may not be but 100 yards or less wide. Something that's very interesting to me, indicative to the topography along the parkway, is that over 13,270 feet of tunnel was bored through the mountains, 26 tunnels in all, and 25 of those are in North Carolina. Only one is in Virginia. So that gives you some indication of how rugged it is in North Carolina. Very extreme climate zones. I mean, just from Asheville to Mount Mitchell, many times has the same number of climate zones as from Asheville to Ontario, Canada. So there's a big swing in temperatures as you move around the Blue Ridge Parkway and the waters we'll be fishing tonight. A bunch of trees, in fact, a huge biosphere of flora and fauna, some 99 fish, and all three of the fish that we chase a lot with fly rods are prolific along the Blue Ridge Parkway. Something interesting that's hard to believe sometimes, that this whole parkway is run on a $16 million budget. Yet it has a $1.4 billion impact on the local communities. But right now, actually last year, it had right at $500 million in deferred repairs. Now, the Great American Outdoor Act should help that, but going into this year, it had close to $500 million in repairs that just couldn't be made. Ironically, has 14 million visitors a year, most of any national park. So this is a real treasure. If you're not familiar with the parkway, you come to this part of the country, you should spend a little time on it, and I think you'll see why it is definitely, it is a national treasure that needs to be preserved. Okay, I mentioned to you that we had divided the 252 miles in North Carolina of the Blue Ridge Parkway up into 4 distinct sections. And I'm going to show you those sections real quick. The section 1 starts in Cherokee, North Carolina, sitting right up against the southern face of the Smokies. And it heads south and then back north again up to a place called Buck Springs, which is right under Asheville, North Carolina. You see Brevard down here in Waynesville. This yellow area that I've circled here is where we're going to be talking about tonight. And then from Buck Springs, it goes north up through Asheville, up to Mount Mitchell, and then up to Spruce Pine, North Carolina. Is the second section of 63 miles. The third section picks up there at Spruce Pine right at Highway 80, and goes all the way up to E.B. Jeffrey State Park, just north of Blowing Rock and east of Boone, North Carolina. And I've highlighted some of the waters that I write about in the book. But then also E.B. Jeffrey State Park, all the way up to the North Carolina Virginia line, is section 4. And this is an incredible area to fish also. Nearly all of the water is on the south side of the parkway here. At Stone Mountain State Park and several other scenic areas and wild areas on the backside here. So that's generally the 4 areas that we're going to talk about. Now what I want to do is talk about the Davidson River specifically. And to do this, what I did was just kind of cut and paste a page out of the book, which I put before every body of water in the book. I do an at a glance, which is really the vital signs of the river. Now, let me say this before we get started. These are a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight about the Davidson River are my opinion. They're based on my 50 years of growing up around and visiting the Blue Ridge Parkway and fishing the Davidson River and hiking and playing in that area. And it's what I've experienced. There are a lot of other people that have done the same thing that may have a different take than I've got, and that's okay. And even a lot of what I would say may not be what you would hear from Kevin at the Davidson River Outfitters, or from Carolyn if you talk with her at the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. They might have a different take on it, but I'm going to give you my firsthand boots in the water take on the river tonight. I'm going to start by giving you this overview. I rank it 5 thumbs up out of 5. I think it's the best you can get in the Southeast as far as fishing, because it's got something for everyone. The GPS fixes that I've identified here, the source fix and the mouth fix, are, you can see there, the mouth fix is at 2,125 feet, which is at the bridge of just right at Davidson River Outfitters at Highway 64 and Highway 276. And then it goes north from there up to the source fix at about 2,900 feet. Now, the comment about the 2,900 feet is that this river doesn't source very high. Therefore, the water temperatures might be a bit warmer in the winter. Therefore, it can fish a little better in the winter than some of the other streams and rivers that source higher, and the water might be 5 or 7 degrees colder than the Davidson River. On the backside of that, in the summer, it may run a little warm and may slow down a little bit. So, having said that, it's still a great river. I call it large, the size at the mouth from the standpoint, it can be anywhere from 40 or 50 feet across there at the bridge. The gradient is almost flat. Over the 10.8 miles from the source to the bridge, there's only a 1.4% change in grade, which is just minuscule. That's only a 775-foot drop over the 10.8 miles. Now, the lower section, the midsection, and the upper section vary a little bit from that, but not that much. It doesn't get steep until you get up into the headwaters, and those headwaters can get up into the 19% range, which can make your nose bleed. It can be so hard. The effort, the lower section is easy. I call it assisted living, because you can step right out of your car or truck down in the water and walk and wade. And not do any climbing or anything. Same to a good part, the midsection, although there are some areas in there that's assisted living, but there are some areas in there that are also nosebleed sections that I call it totally across it moderate. The upper section, I say moderate because you don't get into the headwaters, and it's still only about a 3% grade there. So it's very, very fishable. Pressure, lower section is going to be moderate. The midsection is going to be heavy, especially right now, since there are so many fish from the hatchery in the river up there. I was up there last weekend, and I bet you there were 1,000 people up there wandering around in the woods. It looked like the Walking Dead up there. It was kind of spooky. The upper section would be moderate or to slight in many cases, just because it's harder to get to. The fishing quality, all sections I consider to be good to excellent in my book, and you've got all 3 species of trout there. Let me say a quick word about Tropical Storm Fred damage that happened a month or 2 ago. There's some parts of the river that I'll show you that hardly have changed at all. And there are some parts of the river that have radically changed. In fact, there are some places that the course of the river actually changed. And I'll show you images of that. There are places where there were deep holes that are now gravel bars, and there are places that were gravel bars that are now deep holes. So, this is not the first time this has happened. It's happened a lot of times down through the eons of years, and this too will pass. The thing that's different about with us humans being around is that we have a hatchery up there, and the flood blew all of the fish out of the hatchery and deposited them either in the parking lot, in the forest, or in the stream, or in the Davidson River. And there are many places that I'll show you where you can stand and you can count 50 or 75 fish down in the water. It's just unbelievable the amount of fish that are in this river right now, competing for almost no bugs, because most of the entomology got blown downstream from the hatchery all the way down into the French Broad River. So they're probably somewhere in the Holston Reservoir right now. So that's kind of the vitals of the Davidson River. What I want to do now is show you an overview map and give you an idea of kind of the way this works. Starting down here at Pisgah Forest, I've divided it into 3 sections. I've got a 5.4 mile lower section that goes all the way up to Looking Glass Creek, where it comes in. And then the next 2.2 miles up to Rockhouse Creek is the midsection. And then 3.2 miles above that is where you get to the source. And that's where the 2 headwaters of Daniel Ridge Creek and Wright Fork come in up here and form the headwaters. And that's really where the Davidson River forms up. So that's kind of the layout that I'm going to talk with you tonight in each of these sections. You can see that Looking Glass Rock really dominates the whole landscape here, hundreds of feet above sea level, above the floor of the valley here. And you've also got John Rock down here that dominates it from the south. You have the Blue Ridge Parkway. As you can see, all of the water comes off of the Blue Ridge Parkway with the exception of Avery Creek down here. We're going to talk about all of these, and I'm going to show you images of all of these, how to get to them, what they fish like, and that type of thing. There are 7 major tributaries that I've identified that I have fished extensively down through the years that I'm going to show you. I've got those outlined here, but there are also some others. There's several others that are not shown here, like Grogan and Cedar Rock and John Rock Creek, which are down here close to the hatchery that come in. And then you get up here off of Looking Glass, and you got Big Bear Pen Creek and Log Hollow Creek, and all of those along here that I'll mention, but I'm not going to show you details on those. A little bit of the history of this area right here. The river originally was called the Rolling River back in the Revolutionary War period. And a dude by the name of Benjamin Davidson, after the Revolutionary War, was granted 640 acres down in this area here, down in a place called Sycamore Flats, kind of in this area close to the campground. And he drained it, put some dikes in there and drained the water out of it so he could farm it. He put a mill there where he could make some money with his mill also. And eventually the name was changed from Davidson Creek, from Rolling Creek to Davidson Creek, and then Davidson River, which is what we know it today. So that's kind of how it got its name. And that's what I understand from the records, from a lot of the locals around there. Sometime in the early part of the last century, another dude by the name of George W. Vanderbilt III came along. And he had a bunch of money. This guy was the grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt, which owned shipping and railroad lines and everything. So he came down with a lot of money, and he bought up 68,000 acres in this area right in here. And it amounts to about 107 square miles he bought up in this area. Now, the good thing for us is that this guy was a conservationist, in so much that he started the first forestry school in America up in this area right here. And it was named the Biltmore Forest School. And people came from all over the country to attend that school and to learn how to manage forest in a modern manner. And of course, he owned much of this property that we're talking about tonight around the Davidson River. So a lot of the property around here was well managed long before it became vogue, to well manage things in the forest. To put this in perspective, And because I think it's interesting to understand the influence that one person can have on something we're enjoying today. Here's an overview map of the area. Here's Asheville up here. Here's Brevard and Pisgah Forest. Here's the Blue Ridge Parkway and Waynesville over here. Here's roughly the Davidson River watershed here. Now here's the perspective I want you to get some sense of. George Vanderbilt owned a place up here called Buck Springs Lodge, and it was an Adirondack lodge, a huge lodge up on the where the Blue Ridge Parkway is now, and it was about 12 miles from his estate in Asheville, with a straight line up Big Creek. You could look right up Big Creek, which is a headwater of the Mills River, the North Mills, and he could see his estate over here. Well, to put all this in perspective, the 68,000 acres that he owned, there's 1 square mile of it right there. And he had 107 of these square miles. So if you put 107 of these little blocks in here, you basically have not only the Davidson River watershed, all of the cradle of forestry area that I'll show you later, and almost everything up to Mills River and below. So he owned a huge piece of the Pisgah, what we now call the southern district of Pisgah National Forest. So that's just a little bit of perspective right there that I thought was interesting. Let me get back and give you just a little bit more overview of, and then we're going to start down here at the bottom, and we're going to work our way up this river. And I'm going to show you what it looks like all the way up and what you might expect. Also, after Vanderbilt sold this property, the majority of it, to Carr Lumber Company, which did a lot of controlled logging in this area. Then it went to the National Forest Service. And then the CCC Corps in the early part of the last century, basically during the Depression, built Camp F1 right here at the Hatchery that I'll show you some of the ruins of a little bit later on. So this Hatchery and Outdoor Center that's in disrepair right now because of the flood. The good thing about it, not only do they raise a lot of fish there that populates a lot of these streams, but it also dumps a huge amount of highly oxygenated water and a lot of extra nutrients from this point down all the way through the Davidson River. And what that does, it really creates an artificial environment for this Davidson River here, and part of the way up a lot of these tributaries that come in, because there's so much more food in this part of the river than there are other rivers and streams around here, just because of the artificial influence that it has. In fact, the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission several years ago did a survey of the Davidson River, and they found there were about 216 rainbows, about 64 browns, and a whole bunch of specks or brook trout for each water acre of the Davidson River. Now, I can guarantee you right now, from the hatchery down, those numbers are a lot more than they were back in those days, because of the thousands of fish that have been blown out of this hatchery that are now making their way slowly downstream to populate this area. And they'll go all the way down to and into the French Broad River, I'm sure. So that's a big influence. In fact, Trout Unlimited named it one of the top 100 trout streams in America. It is definitely a trophy class trout population, and I'll show you some of those in a few minutes. A lot of waterfalls, a lot of slides. The Davidson River Campground, I'll show you where that is. That's right down here. My Trout Unlimited chapter goes down here a couple of times a year, and we stay here and we fish. It's a great place to hang out because you've got Brevard and Pisgah Forest here, that if you don't want to stay in the campground and eat camp food and swat mosquitoes, you can go in town and eat civilized food and stay in a civilized place. The other unique thing about the Davidson River and its tributaries is that it has an excellent road and trail system. There's almost none of the waters that I'm going to show you tonight that's not either paralleled by a road that's either paved or a Forest Service road not paved or a trail where you can get on. So all in all, this is a great watershed that I think if you have not fished it, you will fish it at some point. And if you have fished it, hopefully you'll learn something tonight that you'll you might enjoy it a little bit more. Okay, what we're going to do is go downstream to the mouth. This is Davidson River Outfitters right here, about where that X is. That's the Highway 64 bridge going across, and paralleling this river all the way up to this point, all the way to here is Highway 276. And there's almost no place that it's not within 10 yards of the river. And in some cases is closer than that. You see at Davidson River, the campground here that I mentioned earlier. This is really a really cool place to hang out. There's a ranger station here. You got the only sizable tributary that feeds it is a creek called Avery Creek. And it's a lot of the locals say that it's their favorite. Has horse stables up here where you can rent horses, and you can actually pack up in here with your rod if you want to, and really play like a Western stream and pack in, tie your horses up, fish, and then come back down. But this is a really neat area right here over that lower area. Down around the camp area in the summer, there are obviously a lot of tourists and swimmers in that area. The interesting thing though is the lower area below it, I think, is underfished, and there are a lot of big fish in that area. So don't shy away from it. Okay, I'm gonna take you up the river now and give you some images. The public section, which was where you're going to start fishing, which actually is managed as hatchery supported water all the way up to Avery Creek, starts at this Pisgah National Forest boundary line on 276, which is about 100 yards north of Davidson River Outfitters. So you're right there at the start of it. I show you this picture because a lot of people say, can you park? Where is it safe to be? About every 50 to 100 yards, you've got paved turnouts where you can park. This is actually covered with a lot of leaves. Actually, you could probably get about 4 or 5 cars in this one section here. And every couple of 100 yards, you've got one of these. So the river is right here. So it's really easy to get on and off the river there. This is at the bridge. This is actually standing under the bridge, looking upstream there at Davidson River Outfitters. And this gives you some idea of the width of the river. It's about, maybe, 20 yards across here, 30 yards right here, a lot wider than it looks, but it's shallow. It's no more than hip deep all the way over to the other bank. And there's a little bit of cut on the other bank there where the big ones kind of hang out. But this is generally what the lower section will look like there. This is a little further upstream. This is like in Sycamore Flats area, kind of maybe a mile upstream, what it looks like. You see it's low and slow there, relatively shallow, anywhere from about 18 inches to about 3 feet deep there. Not a lot of obstructions. The fish tend to hang along the banks and up under these undercut banks, these root balls there, but just a beautiful section. This image was taken last week. There's a little brown, typical of what you'll see in there. This is maybe 12, 13, 14 inch little brown right there. Cute little fish. Here you are up at the Davidson. This is the road coming off of 276 going into the Davidson River campground right here. This is a campground map. This is going north on 276. Here's the road coming in I just showed you and the bridge over it. And these are all campsites for motorhomes or tent camping or primitive camping. I like this area up here because you have Avery Creek, the first tributary coming into the first sizable tributary coming into the river, comes across right from these campsites right here. So this confluence is a great fishing area here, especially in the summer when the hatches are coming off with that fresh water coming here. I'll show you that area in just a minute. Chris and I camp a lot, right in this area right here. In fact, that's our campsite right there a lot. We really like this campground. This is the bridge going over to the campground. This is what the water starts looking like as you get up into this area. You start getting some boulders in the middle. The water is still relatively shallow. You have some runs up against the bank, some cuts and runs. You get a little further up, you get into some riffles and runs in the curves. So this is really just great fishing area right here. A little further up, this shows you some of the effect of the storm that came through a few months ago. You can see the bank over here, how it's been scourged all the way up to this area right here. Most of what you're seeing here, this gravel, was sedimentation or sand before the tropical storm Fred came through. Now it's all gravel and small rock, which is good. That's a good thing in the future because bugs are going to be growing on all of those rocks. They couldn't grow in the sand. So the same thing on the bottom of the river is taking a lot of the sedimentation out of these areas, especially up against the road, which is running right over here and back behind where this image is taken, where the water speeds up. It's really cut into the bank over there and dug it out really well. So there's a really great places for fish to hang over there. This is taken from the roadway looking down. You can see the water, how clear it is, but you can also see how high the water was with Tropical Storm Fred a couple of months ago. That's probably 10 feet. In fact, someone I think said it was like 10.5 to 11 feet above normal stage for that water. And that's about right. When you look at that deposit of debris right there, you see that a lot now. But notice in the river's still pretty darn clean. In fact, for last weekend in leaf season, there's really not that many leaves in the water. So it's still very highly fishable. This is a little further upstream. You do see some trees that were undercut that fell over. You see a big tree right there. You see the banks right here. A lot of the sediment's been removed. These deep cuts here, highly fishable. In fact, when I went out and jumped on this rock right here, I spooked about 5 fish that were holding right here, looking into that current. So very fishable. Got into a nice fish here, just up from where I was just showing you that image. That's not it though. I didn't catch that fish, but it was caught in the Davidson River in the area we're talking about. This is the size of pigs that we're talking about that are in this river. This is, what is this, a 20 to 22 or 3, 4 inch fish? There's a lot of them in here. I call them typhoon class, submarine class style fish, because that's what they look like. They look like a Russian typhoon class when they're laying down there on the bottom. Get off of that. There we go. And there we go. Going a little upstream here again, you can see the cobbling of the removal of a lot of the sand and debris here. See where this tree got hit over here by a log, broke it open. This was taken just upstream and down from the end of this section. This is pretty typical. You'll find one of these about every half mile coming across the stream, but you can wade and fish through it. It's not a big deal. These trees got cut from the undercut from the flood and just fell over. There's a lot of deadfalls and a lot of fall over trees like that. Well, that brings us up to the end of this section of the lower section. And this is the bridge on 276 that crosses Looking Glass Creek, which is coming in from under the bridge and joining the Davidson River right here. This is the second large feeder coming in, or tributary coming into the Davidson River. This is a huge pool of water. It's deep because this is a pretty good sized flow coming in. It digs it out probably 10 or 12 feet deep in the middle. And it's always, if you walk up here and look down, especially at noon, which Chris Sloan and I do a lot, this is the kind of thing you see. This fish right here is at least 20 inches long, or this one's probably closer to 24 inches long. And I think there's 8 of them here that you can see. And this is not all of them. This is just the focal length of my phone camera that I threw up last weekend. And that's what's in this hole. And we've tried everything in the world. I mean, I've even fished this with guides. I've stood up here and spotted for Chris. He threw everything in his box at them. And it's just these fish have seen it and done it all. And that's the reason they're big, is because they don't eat everything that comes at them. So that's the end of the lower section of the Davidson River. And now we're going to go up into the midsection of the Davidson River. To give you kind of an overview of this, you have 2 tributaries. You've got Looking Glass Creek, which is the largest tributary coming in to the Davidson, even larger than Avery Creek down there that I'll show you. And then you got Rock House Creek, which comes off the backside of Looking Glass, just to the west of Looking Glass Rock, and feeds in just above the hatchery. I'm going to walk you up this area and show you what it looks like, especially after the flood of 2 months ago. That probably most of the damage that I saw was along this area here, although a lot of it in the river seems to have been corrected. Some of the dams have either been removed or either broken, or the water's found their way around them some way. But I'll give you some general idea. But this is a sweet spot of the Davidson River right here, both for fishing and playing, because not only do you have the hatchery here, you got Sliding Rock, which is a very popular place to hang out and play in the summer. You got the Cradle of Forestry, which is where the first forestry school was based out of. Then you have Looking Glass Falls down here, which is the largest falls on the Davidson River. There's just a lot to do along this area. So let's start here at the bridge that I just showed you. And looking upstream, this is the Davidson River coming toward the bridge. It used to just come along this bank over here, and this was all a gravel bed over here, gravel and cobbled bed. The flood of 2 months ago blew out this right side of the left side of it here, and now the river's pretty much equally split, coming down each side of this little island right here. And it's actually really good. It's great fishing. I mean, where it comes back in the confluence right here, that runs along these these boulders against the road. This is upstream in a place that we call Horse Cove, which is a very popular place to fish along there, and a very productive place to fish. You can see how far the water got up onto the bank and what it did to the bank. It scourged it probably 30 yards back up into the rhododendron and laurel. This all used to be rhododendron and laurel through here. But these trees came crashing through here, took all of that out, and a lot of them are still deposited along the way. But the waterway itself is still clean. I mean, it's very fishable. It's just that it doesn't have as many bugs in there because they all got blown away. There's a little brown trout. I didn't get a very good picture of him. This is right below the hatchery that I'm going to show you in a minute, just at the west side of Horse Cove section of the river. And you can see the debris that was deposited in this area. The river used to come through. This is the Davidson, came through here, did a sharp turn to the left, and then went behind these trees and continued on. It's dammed up now. And it's changed direction, and is flowing through another depression that it probably flowed through 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So, that's one way of looking at this flood and the damage we're seeing, is that, this is not the first time this happened. It's just, it just doesn't happen that often in our lifetime. But you can see the debris field here. This gentleman was re-rigging here and tying on and getting ready to fish this side over here. There were a bunch of fish hanging in this area right here that you can't see with the reflection, but they were there. Just above where you just saw is the Pisgah Center for Wildlife Education. And this is also where the fish hatchery is. So you really have two facilities here. You have the hatchery, and you also have this education center for hands-on learning. It's got an amphitheater in there. And I mean, it's just a lot of stuff to do in that area right there. This is a drone shot last fall of the hatchery before the flood. You can see that you come in off the Forest Service Road right here off of 475. And you come into the parking area. Here's the learning center. Here's the hatchery. All of this got scourged out. All of these runs were emptied, and all of these fish either went up into the forest, into the parking lot, or into the Davidson River, which runs right along beside here. So they didn't all get, and there's a couple of streams back over here too, John Rock Creek and a couple of those, I think is the name of those. And some of those fish are in there. I saw a bunch of them in there. So that's kind of what this facility looks like. There was also a CCC camp here in the early part of the last century that managed this area, built a lot of bridges, a lot of roads, a lot of trails, and projects up and along the Blue Ridge Parkway. I took this picture a couple of years ago, and this is commemorating those CCC workers who did so much work that we're enjoying today. This is Forest Service Road 475 coming off of 276 at the bridge. This is the turn-in that you go into the center that we were just looking at. And you can see it's closed right now. This was taken last weekend. But look at the cars up here. And it goes around the corner, and there's a ton of them behind me. There were probably 50 or 75 cars parked along here. All of these people were on the river over here fishing and chasing the fish. This is below the bridge from the intersection I just showed you. They're looking upstream. You can see a lot of the debris from the flooding is here. This is a drop, a natural drop here. Always a good place to fish. That's the bridge. That's looking up from the bridge, standing on the bridge and looking up. This area that you see right here, you can see water coming out. This is actually water coming out of the races on the hatchery. This is where all the water comes out and goes into the Davidson River. And this is where all that oxygen and all of that nutrients come in and start feeding the bugs from here down that makes this river so productive. That's a guy fishing right there also. Right, this was taken last weekend. Standing on the bridge and looking straight down, I circled the fish. And this is just like a 10 square foot, area right here. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 fish just in this one area right here. And they were all the way across the river, stacked 2 or 3 deep under the bridge, in front of the bridge, everywhere. So it's that way all the way up the river right now. It's just amazing. Just above the hatchery is the dam that was put in, to feed the hatchery the water. You can see the people fishing the water above the dam. None of the fish that escape the hatchery are up here. There may be a few that run up over this weird dam. I mean, because they can if they want to. But most of the influence of the flood impacting the river with the fish out of the hatchery, as well as the oxygen and the nutrients, start from here down to the mouth of the river. This area up here is really wild water, uninfluenced by the hatchery in any way. So here's a guy walking across. I stood there and watched him catch about 6 fish while he was fishing there. You can see him casting there. There's lines going out. He caught about 6 fish right along in that. These guys up here couldn't figure out what was going on. That's the end of the middle section. It ends at this area right here where I've got the yellow line, Rock House Creek. It starts there, it goes upstream through this gorge that I'm going to show you, runs for 3.2 miles up to its source point right here. It's also an interesting stretch of water in that you've got four tributaries coming into it. You have Cove Creek, which is a fun creek to fish. You've got the two headwaters, Daniel Creek right up here, Daniel Ridge Creek, and Wright Fork, and then you've got Laurel Fork down here, which is another one. There's also one other right here called Long Branch that I don't have on here, but it is highly fishable. It's very small blue liner, but it seems like they keep changing the regulations on that. Kevin at Davidson River Outfitters last week, we were talking about that, and he said he thinks they've changed it again. And I'm not sure, it's probably marked on the trees. Just pay attention if you get up there and want to fish it. But this is a great area. You do have a primitive campground here where this is parallel by 475 that keeps going. It just goes right off the bottom of the map right here. But you can take the Forest Service Road here. There's a primitive campground. As you go on up, there was a CCC trout rearing station before the hatchery that I just showed you. This is where it originally was up here, and I'm going to show you some of those ruins. So let's start down here and go upstream, and I'll show you what you can expect. Right above the hatchery dam, when you get past Rock House Creek, you start getting into what I call a gorge. You call it a canyon. I think a gorge is a canyon with trees, is what I call them over here. But this is the best picture that I could take that would illustrate the change in topography and how deep this is. It's probably 75 yards to the bottom of this area right here. There is a trail that parallels it, though, about 20 feet above it, that from the beginning to the end. So you can walk that trail and hightail it down into the creek by kind of rappelling down in, holding rhododendron branches and just kind of jumping off and letting them parachute you in there. Or you can put in the creek or put in the Davidson River and fish that mile or mile and a half up to the top to Wellback swimming hole and get out up there. I would just say, if you do this, do it with someone, because this is, if there's a dangerous part of this river, this is the part of the river that I would consider dangerous. This is the trail that I was telling you about. That's about 20 feet above the river, and it goes all the way. So you can jump down in there, and here's another look. It really doesn't do it justice, but the topography goes up at about a 45 or 60 degree angle on both sides. You have a lot of slab rock, a lot of slick rock on the side. You can see where the scourging of the flood took a lot of these leaves off this creek, off these trees, and these trees are 8 or 10 feet above the water level over here. There's a nice brown. There's some big fish in this area. In some of these pools, you can dredge out some pretty good sized fish, because not a lot of people go in there to fish. This is me tying on. There's a lot of slab rock. I don't know why I've got so much line in the water right there. It acts like I don't know what I'm doing. I probably didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, you also see that I'm wet fishing. I do wet fish a lot. I rarely wear waders unless the water is 50 degrees or less. I like to fish. I like to fish wet. This is up just at the top of the gorge section at a place called Whaleback Fishing Hole. This is an amazing place of slab rock. Behind me is a trough where the Davidson River and the Cove Creek come together and flow through this trough behind me that's maybe 10 feet wide and probably 20, 25 feet long. And it's always got some rainbows and browns in there. So not only is it a good place to hang out in the summer, There's always normally a bunch of rock hoppers and sunbathers and people like that may be there that kind of can make it kind of interesting sometimes. But the fish don't seem to mind. So just fish through and enjoy yourself, and you'll have a good time. This is where Cove Creek comes under the road, Forest Service Road 475, and goes down to Whaleback Rock. This is the road going up Cove Creek into the camp area. I'm going to take you back up here later on after we finish the lower section or the upper section right here, and we'll talk about that. So that's where it goes across. This is moving upstream. You can see the Davidson River is starting to get smaller now as you go up. You can see there's some effect from the flooding, but not a lot right in here. You get a little further upstream, you can see a little more effect in the flatter areas where the flooding affected it. Lots of little rainbows, terrible picture, but a little rainbow. This is one area where you can see it just picked up entire trees and floated them down the river with a root ball and everything. And this tree was fully 2.5 feet in diameter right here. And it took it downstream and deposited it. And it also moved these rocks. These rocks were not here last year. You know, these are, I don't know, probably 20, 30 ton rocks, and it flipped and rolled these rocks downstream. But look at that bank over there. Look at that undercut where these fish are hanging out. I caught two browns underneath there last weekend. Here's another example as you start heading up of how it uncovered so many boulders. There's root balls that are hung in there. There's slab rock over here that was rhododendron and laurel before the flood. But when you look at the waterway is still pretty clean and very fishable. Little brook trout. I don't know what this little fellow was doing down that far, but occasionally he either got washed down or decided to go south. But anyway, pretty little brook trout. This is the Davidson River coming up to a bridge that goes under and then heads up toward the headwaters. That's the direction we're going to be going. This creek coming in right here is a creek called Laurel Creek. I'm going to take you up that creek too. That's one of the tributaries, the higher tributaries coming in. As you go upstream, kind of start moving behind the campgrounds that I showed you earlier. This is what the water looks like. In fact, you can a lot of slab rock, a lot of holes and runs and riffles that really make for interesting fishing. I have found aluminum is really good. I wear corkers and I use a lot of aluminum in here, and it works really well. A lot better to me than felt does. This is me creeping up right here. This was taken a year or two ago, and I've actually got felt on right there over my old Sims boots, but they actually hung in there pretty well. Another nice little rainbow that was in that little fall that you take me. That's the kind of stuff I've done a lot in my career. Probably shouldn't do as much of it as I did, or I probably wouldn't have been cut on as much as I have been lately. Above the campground in the upper section of the Davidson River, there was a CCC trout rearing station. The ruins of that rearing station is still here. You can still see a lot of there's a dam here, there's a dam here, and there are depressions and runs that were earthen runs, and then they use concrete blocks to actually do the water entry and exits that would go out of there. But this stuff is all through, along with a couple of buildings and power poles and stuff like that date all the way back to the mid and early part of the last century. This is the trail that goes up to the top of the upper section. Has a really, I think Forest Service Road 106 goes from the gate, and then this is Trail 105 that goes north up to the headwaters. You have a lot of waterfalls up here, nice brown trout in this area. This is headed right up to the source. You can see us maybe 10 feet across the Davidson River. The trail parallels it all the way up. Another little rainbow up there. This is the confluence of the two of Daniel Ridge here and Right Fork coming together. And this is actually the beginning of the Davidson River behind these trees right here going south. So that's kind of the upper section that we're leaving right now. And now I'm going to carry you back down and show you real quickly the tributaries that I think are worth fishing first if you haven't fished this area. There are 7 of these tributaries. You got Avery Creek, which is the southernmost one in section 1. Section 2, you've got Looking Glass and Rockhouse Creek come into section midsection. And then the upper section, you got Cove Creek, you got the 2 headwaters, Right Fork and Daniel Creek, and then you got Laurel Creek coming in here. So we're going to go back down here and we're going to jump on Avery Creek. I give it a four thumbs up. It sources, reasonably high. The water's reasonably cool there, even in the summer. It's small at the mouth. I'll show you where the mouth comes in. The gradient average is about 4%. Over the 4.4 miles, drops about 1,100 feet. The effort, I call it moderate to difficult. The headwaters can be difficult from the camp area, from the horse area that you'll see. I'll show you. It begins to get moderate right there. Pressure, none to slight. It's rare that I get around anyone fishing this area right here. I think the fishing is good, and it's got all 3 species on here. I might add that some of the old timers in the Brevard, Transylvania area that I've been friends with for some time claim that this was their father's favorite trout stream back in the early part and mid part of the last century. I don't see that, but it is a fun stream to fish. And here's kind of the flow of it right here. Here's the Davidson River campground. It comes in to the Davidson River right here under 276 road and flows up to some horse stables. You have Presley Cove, you have Maxwell Cove, you have Clawhammer, which is my favorite, and then you have Henry Branch comes into the main flow of Avery Creek right here. It flows 4.4 miles down from this point right here from about 3,300 feet. You have a road that follows it all the way up to Clawhammer and then peels off and comes back in over on Looking Glass on 276. And then all of these tributaries that feed it have trails with the exception of Maxwell Cove. I've never found a trail on it, but it's not the best fishing anyway. I think Clawhammer is, if you're after brookies, Henry Branch is, and even Presley Cove above the stables right here is a really good place to fish. This is the Davidson River flowing south, right above the campground, Davidson River campground. This is Avery Creek coming in from the right here. You see it's about 10 or 15 feet across. It is very shallow right here. This is the 276 Highway 276 going north to Waynesville. This is the water coming underneath. You can see they've got this open pretty big because there can be a lot of water come underneath here when it's flooding. Little brown trout. I don't know why I got so many brown trout in here, but I do. But I guess I catch a lot of brown trout. This is what Avery Creek looks at as you get on up into the forest and get away from civilization and you start heading to the horse stables. At this point, it's about, maybe 5 to 7, 8 yards wide. Good undercut banks over here, good deep little runs. Looking down from the road that parallels it, which is at this point, maybe 50 yards above it. That's off of Forest Service Road 477, parallels it all the way up to Clawhammer. And you can see the creek down here. It's a long way down there, and that's probably an 80-degree incline from the road to this point. So you have to kind of pick your way down. Clawhammer is the best way to get down there. So that's all I'm going to say about Avery Creek. My favorite of all of the tributaries of Davidson River is Looking Glass Creek, which flows for 5 miles. It has a huge variety of water. I give it a 5 thumbs up. partly because of the way it fishes, partly just because a lot of sentimental reasons. It's the first trout stream I ever fished, and it's the first mountain stream as a kid I ever played in. So as you notice, it doesn't form up that high at about 3,100 feet. And I'll show you where that is. It's medium at the mouth. It's not big. It averages about 3.1% gradient over that 5 miles, which is really very doable. Below the falls is very easy fishing, very flat, very easy. Above the falls can be moderate to difficult, just depending on the section. The road parallels it almost all the way up, so you can pick and choose where you want to get off and kind of make that as easy as you want. Below the falls, you'll have some moderate pressure. Above the falls, you're not going to see anybody up there. You might see them, but they're going to be picnicking or doing something else. The fishing quality I consider good, and mostly you're going to find rainbows and browns below the falls. Above the falls, you're going to have rainbows and browns and some brookies as you get up into the headwaters and into some of the feeders. So it's a great stream. Here it is, the flow of it starting at the bridge and heading up. This is Looking Glass Falls. I'm going to show you a picture. In fact, that's the image on the front of the book, Fly Fishing the Blue Ridge Parkway. I think one of the most beautiful waterfalls in North Carolina. And actually the first waterfall I ever saw in my life was that waterfall. You have a tributary. The first tributary is Moore Cove Creek with another waterfall on it, not a big waterfall, but a waterfall up here you can hike to. And then up several miles just in the shadow of Looking Glass Rock here, you've got a place called Sliding Rock. And I'm going to show you an image of that. This is about a 30-yard long slick rock that people go slide down into a big pool of water that has trout in it at the bottom. Just north of there, you've got Big Bearpin Branch and Log Hollow Branch come in right here. This is a pretty good, decent sized little tributary to fish. And then above here, you've got the headwaters where you got Clawhammer comes in out of the Cradle of Forestry. And you got Bennett Cove and Cherry Cove. Basically, Cherry Cove is, I believe, the name of that comes in. Now, I'll tell you, whomever you talk to, you're going to get a different take on what are the official headwaters of Looking Glass Creek. And this is my take based on talking with forest rangers, looking at topo maps, satellite imagery, topo quads, and everything that I can find is Cherry Cove and Clawhammer come together right by the road right here. In fact, Chris Sloan and I were up there earlier this year, and I've got a picture that we took. I'm going to show you that. So let's start down here at the bridge and walk our way up. This is kind of an overview from the Blue Ridge Parkway looking down at this watershed that we're talking about. It's a very beautiful place. The dominant feature is this Looking Glass Rock right here. There's more of a close-up of it right here. Great hike to the top of it off of Forest Service Road 475. Okay, this is the bridge going up 276, going that way. And here is going upstream. The creek is flowing down underneath the bridge, going upstream. And you're going to get up to Looking Glass Waterfall. And this is Looking Glass Waterfall. I mean, it's just a fine, beautiful place that's loaded with tourists. You'll be the only person out here fishing. This is about a 10-foot hole, 10-foot deep hole right here that's worth fishing and dredging. You'll catch nice browns and rainbows in there. And occasionally you'll find a washed down brookie will be in there. But from here all the way to the bridge is highly fishable in the flat areas, get against the banks, up against the dog hobble and rhododendron and laurel, and that's where they're going to be hanging out. This is me approaching the waterfall from the right side. This is slab rock over here. You can't climb it, but the wind and the thrust of the wind is so strong here. You have to really horse your line in here, a lot of roll cast and things like that, but fish this right rock wall all the way down and you will catch rainbows, mostly rainbows and a few browns. This is a brown that I caught in the hole there last year. Nice little 14-inch brown. Moving upstream, you can see that it starts to close in a little bit. This is sliding rock. At the bottom is a really nice pool here that when no one's here and it's closed, you can fish it. And it's always got a bunch of little rainbows and browns in there. Upstream, this is what Looking Glass looks like. This was taken last week. See a little bit of scourging right here, but generally this creek is in pretty good shape. It is crisscrossed by Highway 276 probably 5 or 6 times. And all of these bridges were built in the early part of the last century with some repair work, recent. I say recent, probably in the last 50 years. But all this work, as I understand it, was done mostly by a lot of the CCC work groups that were based out of around where the hatchery is right now. Going upstream, there's no little brown trout. You can see the road parallels it, absolutely parallels it, and very fishable all along here. Little waterfalls and runs all the way up. Just great fishing. This was taken last week. You can see there's very little damage or scourging, except this area right here. We're looking downstream. And this was basically a log jam all the way across the creek. And it hadn't yet, but at some point it's going to silt in and it will form a dam here. And in the next water event, rain event, this thing will break and cause another flood downstream. So I'm sure the Forest Service or the Highway Department or somebody's going to get in there and either dynamite this or take a track hoe and dig it out and where that river's flowing. A little further upstream, this is what you're getting into. Not quite a blue line environment now, but it's definitely starting to close in. This is the source of Looking Glass. This is Looking Glass flowing from here down. This is Clawhammer coming from under the road, and this is Cherry Cove coming in from the right over here. So this is the very beginning. This is a little fishable hole right here. In fact, Clawhammer on the other side and Cherry Cove are both fishable themselves. In fact, on Clawhammer last weekend, I caught a little brookie up there. Just up from that point is where the cradle of forestry in America is. This is where the first forestry schools in America were right here. George W. Vanderbilt is the guy who started these schools. We owe a lot to him, and the National Forest Service owes a lot to him also. He had several of these, he called them Black Forest Lodges, that were scattered throughout his 68,000 acres just in this holding. And this is where the students and his forest rangers who were taking care of the property would stay in these Black Forest Lodges when they were out in the field. This is the only remaining one that's left, and it's at the Cradle of Forestry where you can go look at it, tour it, and see it. It was all based on Scandinavian architecture, and it's just really beautiful architecture. 100 years old, more than 100 years old, and it's still beautiful. Okay, we're going to talk about Rockhouse Creek next. Rockhouse Creek comes off the west side of Looking Glass Rock. I give it a 2 thumbs up. I don't think it's the best fishing creek going into the Davidson River, but it's worth fishing because there's some pretty places on it, some pretty little waterfalls, and there are some nice fish in there if you get in there when there's good water levels and everything like that. On average, it's a 6.3 mild to moderate drop in elevation as you're going down about 630 feet. Effort's moderate. You're not going to have any pressure. The fishing quality, I say poor to fair. That's probably not being fair with that. It's probably is really fair. And there's mostly rainbows in there is what I've caught. I have seen some brook trout in there. And here it is right here. Here's the hatchery, comes in right across the street, drops like a rocket sled all the way down. And there's a road that parallels it all the way down. Forest Service Road 475B is what parallels it. And so you're able to get on that road up here and come all the way down and fish it. So there's the hatchery. And there's you'll go 475B here and start tracking up it. This is the pool right at 475B, where the road is right in front of this. Excuse me. And here's a pool. We were fishing it with Chris and someone else earlier this year. This is the only place that I've ever caught a double trout fishing. I caught a trout on my strike indicator, which was a number 14 caddis, and also on a little cream midge that I was dropping underneath it. And I caught two rainbow trouts at the same time right here. But this is indicative of the drop pools that you'll see on this creek. Moving further up, I was standing kind of in the foreground here, and this beautiful ray of light was shining down in here. And I thought, well, you know, that's probably God telling me to throw my bug right in there. And you know what? I did. And that's what I caught. I know you think I'm lying, but I'm telling you the gospel truth that ray, when you see a ray of light going down in the creek, throw your bug there, because that's probably someone telling you that's where the fish is. And that was on Rockhouse Creek. That's probably the most special thing ever to happen to me on Rockhouse Creek. This is from 475B, looking down about 50 yards. You can see the creek coming in right here, circling around. Very open forest, easy to get around down in there. In fact, that was a campsite, a primitive campsite right there. That's looking upstream, a lot of the cobbling and drop pools that you see. And here's one of the waterfalls there's several waterfalls on this creek. And this was taken last Sunday. And you can see even then, there are some leaves in here, but not a lot of leaves. Cove Creek is another tributary coming in to section 3, or the upper section. I give it a 3 thumbs up. Its source is a little bit higher, so the water's a little bit colder. It's still small at the mouth, but it's about 11% gradient over the entire 3 miles. So it can be a moderate effort to fish this, except in the stream lower elevations. You're going to have almost no fishing pressure. The fishing quality is average, and bows and specks primarily on there. I'm sure there's probably some browns in there somewhere, but they hide from me. There's a road that parallels Cove Creek, Forest Service Road 809. It is gated. It also has a group campsite, 2 campsites right here where groups can camp. Our bamboo fly rod gathering group has camped here a couple of times, and then had our program down at the Hatchery. Wellback Rock is right here at the mouth where it comes out into the Davidson, and then it flows up and goes up to the higher elevations up here around 4,000 feet. Has only really one significant tributary, which is Caney Bottom Creek, which also has a waterfall on it, as well as a waterfall on Cove Creek itself. There's the road turning in, 477 turning in to go into the creeks coming in. We're going to track up it. That's what it looks like from the bridge I just showed you. You can see it closes in, can get kind of tight. Then it opens back up again. It gets up to a place where there's a ford going across. I think they're getting ready to put a bridge there. This sign has been there for some time, and they basically, because of this watershed, and there is a ford here, they tell you to watch for suddenly rising water, which is pretty good advice along there. You get up into Cove Creek Campground, which is a great place to camp. Well, actually, there's a brown right there that was caught up there under the waterfall, which is this is Cove Creek Falls, I believe, right here. And that pool is highly fishable. And you go around the falls and continue fishing upstream. And this is kind of, for the most part, what you're going to find as you get upstream, headed toward the headwaters of Cove Creek. So the last tributary that I'm going to tell you about before I talk about the headwaters real quick is Laurel Fork. This is it's kind of like Rock Creek. I don't think it's the best creek. I give it a 2 thumbs up. The gradient for Laurel Fork is about a 14.7 source to mouth average. Most the lower area along Forest Service Road 475 is pretty easy to get on. But once you get above the first bridge it crosses, starts getting kind of crazy up there. Effort can be moderate. The pressure, you're not going to see anyone on there, and the fishing quality is average. With only thing I've ever caught on there, I think, are rainbows. Here's what it looks like. It's a pretty simple straight run as it runs up, and then its tributary comes off to the south here, where there's a bridge, comes across and crosses both of those. This is what it looked like a year ago. This is what it looked like 2 months ago. The bridge with the Davidson coming in, Laurel Fork coming in right here. This is what it looked like last week. It totally blew the ends out of both of the bridge to where they had to be totally redone and cobbled and repaired. And then you can see what it did to the flora and the trees and everything at the confluence point right here. It totally just devastated this area, kind of opened the creek up where you can fish it now. The road I think it's 475 is closed here as of last week because you can't travel. It's cutting it too. There's a little brown right there, contradicting myself. As you get further up, that's kind of what it's going to look like. This is what it looks like above the first bridge where 475 crosses. So here we are at the headwaters, the last area that I'll tell you about. There are two headwaters to the Davidson River. One is the Daniel Ridge, which comes in to the west side, and then Right Fork that kind of comes in on the east side. They form up relatively high, so you get some pretty good cool water coming out of there. They're both what I consider to be small blue line streams. They're both nosebleed, steep, 19.2% average gradient over the 1.8 miles and 1.7 miles. They're exactly the same gradient. And I can tell you, I'm in pretty good shape, and 19% gets me huffing and puffing. The effort on both of these are difficult to extreme. You do along the Right Fork, you do have a trail. Trail 106 goes up it, but Daniel Ridge does not have a trail except when 106 cuts across it in its head, further up its headwaters, but no way to get up its main source without going up the body of the water itself. Bows and specks is what you can see there. This is Daniel Ridge. This is Right Fork coming in. This is the source, the forming of the Davidson River right here, which is only about 8 feet across. So let's look up Daniel Ridge here. That's what it has a look. It's not wide at all. Little brook trout is what you're going to find up there. Get a couple of 100 yards up, you get into heavy foliage and blue line, and then it'll open up and you can keep fishing. Right Fork has an abutment, has a train trestle abutment from the old narrow gauge train trail that went across here from Carr Lumber Company. I never failed to catch a couple of little trout along this right side up against this abutment right here. Then it goes up. You actually can see some of the cross ties that are still left from the narrow gauge rail bed that Carr Lumber Company used. There's a nice little rainbow, probably a much bigger rainbow caught in a run like this up under these ledges. Will hold a fish a little bit bigger, but more importantly, look how fat that fish is. I mean, a fish is a healthy little rainbow, 12, 13-inch rainbow. That was a big fish. So there I am. I'm proud of myself. I got to the top of Right Fork, caught that little guy, which was not supposed to be up there in water that small, but somehow he was. And this is me at day's end, worn out, drinking a beer, smoking a cigar. proud of myself. So that's generally what I've got to tell you about the Davidson River watershed. Pretty much everything in there is in that book. So Jason, I'd like to open it up for any questions that we have, and see if we can't wrap this thing up.
Sure, sounds good, Sam. And again, anybody has any question or comments, please feel free to send them through the Q&A. One of the first questions that popped up kind of earlier in the session was somebody was curious, for the Davidson River Outfitters private water, how far does it go from kind of below the shop? Like, what's the extent of their private water section?
That's a great question. It goes from their shop. It actually goes from the Forest Service boundary right above their shop on the Davidson River, where that sign was that I showed you made of stone, all the way to the French Broad River. It's about roughly 2 miles across there. And they not own, but they have the rights to 75 feet on each side of the river. It originally was owned and then transferred to a land trust, and they have the rights from the land trust now. And let me say this. Kevin and his team at Davidson River Outfitters do a great job of managing that piece of water. Not only does it hold huge fish, but they're very careful with the way those fish are treated and harvested and how they're taken care of. And they just do a really great job. So I'm really glad they've got those 2 miles of water.
We had one other person comment about Avery Creek that they agreed it's a great area to kind of get away from the crowd, maybe not as fishable, but certainly enjoyable. One question came in, basically this is maybe more of an opinion, is there a best time of year to fish the watershed?
I like early to late spring and early to late fall. That's kind of a big bandwidth there, but that's kind of when I have found it to fish the best. The Davidson River, because of the watershed source, is relatively low, comparatively speaking, to a lot of other rivers. In the middle of the summer, it'll run a little bit warmer, and the fish get just a little less dissolved oxygen, and they're a little more sluggish. So I tend to get in it when the water's a little colder. And I fish it when it starts getting a little colder until I can't stand it.
Gotcha. And then one other question came up about maybe the tighter sections of the stream on the upper Davidson. It says, how do you fish the tiny waters in the upper Davidson north of the campground where the road ends? Does the stream open up at about a half mile?
It absolutely opens up above the where the upper section turns north and goes through the primitive campground. The river there is amazingly wide and open. And I was up. Chris and I were up there with some of our buddies last year fishing it, and I was amazed. It'd been several years since I'd been up there. I was amazed at how wide that river is. That far up, it's still open casting. I mean, nearly all the way to the source, you can open cast all the way up.
And then this is a question about the hellbender population up there. I guess one person was curious to see if there might have been any damage to the hellbender population with the recent flooding, or if you'd have any ideas about that.
I don't. I didn't see any hellbenders last week, but I wasn't doing anything that I would be seeing any. They tend to like to hang under slab rock and big rocks and things like that where they can shelter. And the water that came down through there probably moved a lot of those rocks. So I would imagine that I would guess that the hellbender population took a hit, or either they're down in the French Broad River now trying to figure out how to get back up into the Davidson River.
Gotcha. And then this is another question, kind of maybe about the ecology side of things, but it said, do you see any problems with water temperatures since the hemlocks have been dying?
I think there's been a creep up in especially along the Davidson of a degree or two maybe, and water temperatures in the summer. It's not as doesn't make as much difference in the spring and fall, but I mean, you remove that much foliation from the banks, you're going to affect it. Fortunately for us, most of these mountain streams that are sourcing up on the south face of these mountain ranges, like the Davidson, you've got a lot of evergreens up there that haven't been affected by the woolly adelgid. So, the waters are still pretty cool. And I don't think yet there's been a noticeable change that would affect the fish, but if it continues, it certainly could.
And then somebody had asked, it says above looking glass, you mentioned claw hammer coming in, but they didn't see where claw hammer comes into looking glass. Do you have any comments on where claw hammer comes into the looking glass area?
Well, you know what? If I said claw hammer, I made a mistake. It's pounding mill. Pounding mill is the northernmost headwater. Clawhammer is on Avery Creek. That was my mistake, and thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, and then there's always a couple questions on flies and patterns. Mike had asked, what flies do you have the most success with on the Davidson? He noticed, just made a comment that most of the pictures seemed like you were using dry flies. So any thoughts on, favorites for that particular stream?
Yeah, generally speaking, in the winter and spring months, January through April, and then, October through December, in the cool months, midges, especially cream midges, blue wing olives, stone flies, darker stone flies, browns and blacks, blue quills are good in the cool months. In the summer months, and my friends laugh at me, but I'm a caddis freak, man. I mean, I love cat. I'll fish caddis as long as I can fish caddis. And then when they're no longer getting hit, I use them as a strike indicator. So, from May through September in the warmer months, I'll use different types of caddis, different colors, golden caddis, black, you name it. March browns, Cahills, sulfurs, stoneflies are the ones that I use the most. I use a dry dropper mostly, especially in the summer months, the warmer months. I'll have one of those on top, and then underneath 18 to 20 inches, I'll have some type of bead head or soft hackle that I can get down on the bottom with. And anytime you ask someone about bugs, it's like religion and politics. You're going to get someone's opinion of what's worked for them. Well, that's kind of what's worked for me. You asked Kevin down at Davidson River, which would make a lot more sense. He could probably be more exact as what he knows would catch fish tomorrow. I know what caught me fish, a month or two ago.
Gotcha. And then this is a great question. So, you've done the North Carolina section, the book. Steve wants to know if you're working on a Virginia section, and if so, when you expect that might be coming out.
Steve, that's a great question, and thanks for asking. The first third of the book I've got done. I'm working on the waters right now. They're all outlined. And I hope by this time next year of 2022, I should be getting this manuscript to the publisher for printing. So hopefully this time next year, Stephen.
Well, that's great. Well, Sam, I don't see any other open questions. We can certainly wait a second or two, but I don't see any coming through here.
Well, that's great. I love the questions, and for anyone who wants a book, you can go to Davidson River Outfitters. Kevin and his team sell them. You can go to my website, wildbearings.com, and you can order it directly. And if you put in the notes column, if you want me to sign it, I'll put a nice note in there and just say that you're the best fly fisherman I've ever known, and you can impress your friends with it and everything like that. But everything we talked about tonight and a whole lot more really about the Davidson River is contained, in that book. So stop at Davidson River, go to our website, or go to many other outfitters up and down the Ridge Parkway, and you can get this book. So if there's no other questions, Jason, I guess we'll shut this one down. Appreciate everyone joining us tonight, and we'll be publishing a schedule for 2022 of some additional waters. And thanks for being with us tonight. And Jason, thanks for hosting, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone next year.